A hopeful fiction story. The dead-end job. Dear Diary. My name is Jake. I was 22 years old, single and living with my mother. Ever since I completed a 3-year course in college, my life has gone nowhere. I spent about 2 years doing absolutely nothing, not moving on to the next step. After finishing my formal education by getting a useless degree in sports and exercise science which I never bothered to take to the next level, since I never actually had an interest in the topic that I was studying. I'd just forgotten about everything I learned soon after. I know all the bones and muscles in the body. That's wonderful, and I know about the importance of having an healthy, balanced diet and a steady, consistent exercise program in order to build and maintain a relatively good-looking body. I joined the basketball team in college. This is the UK, by the way, not America, making it my previous goal to get into the sport on a professional or at least semi-professional level. Yet the competition was absolutely fierce. I thought I was good, the best of the best, but objectively speaking I was only delusional about my performance, since my competition in high school just wasn't that good, meaning I wasn't much better, even though I considered myself, humbly speaking, one of the best basketball athletes in high school. My parents weren't really involved in my decision as to what kind of career I wanted to strive towards. The only work experience I had was 1 week as a receptionist in my high school and another week at a court office. That's about it really. I never considered other options like doing an apprenticeship in a specific trade like plumbing, gas engineer, or as an electrician. I'm a fool who is without aim, no work experience, no money, and time is passing by. I'm wasting my life. I get that, whilst my friends are either in university or working. One of my old friends worked as a security guard for about a year, saved his money whilst living at home with his mum, and then brought a nice £10,000 brand new white BMW. This is before the economy went into recession, by the way. When we were hanging out he'd blast his 90s and early 2000s R&B music out loud whilst speeding down the road, as we were making our way to shisha shops, meeting women and so on. He was the guy who'd get all the invites. He would act as leader, having a very good social life. Me on the other hand, I'm just unemployed, living with my mum and receiving government benefits, around £100 every month. Young, broke, depressed and a joke. My other friends were really concerned about my life. I was going nowhere. I do like to read and write. I do like to study comparative religions. I'm a Christian convert after all. One night 2 of my friends James and Alan invited me to come see them one night. Alan drove round to pick me up, and I was in the back of the car. We had a talk. They eventually asked me, "What are you doing with your life?" I spent over a year going to the local job center, repeating the same cycle of depression and misery with all the other folks who appeared to be quite capable of getting a job yet living in this strange comfort of extremely low income, going nowhere in life. Was I headed in the same direction, 40 years old with no achievements to show for it? What kind of life is that? Life is a gift from God. It shouldn't be wasted. But here I am amongst the government-funded beggars, my metabolism slowing down, my good youthful looks slowly fading away, depression kicking in like a mother. I had to finally admit to my friends that night, I'm too afraid to make phone calls. I am scared of having a conversation with employers. I know what I need to do, but I stutter whilst on the phone. I lack confidence and don't know what to do. I cried that night. My friends didn't laugh at me. They said they will help me. That night my life changed. Before I knew it, I was applying for every job I could. I even took up a voluntary job to build my CV at a charity shop near my house. 6 months later, with my new experience and confidence slowly building from taking chances, I managed to secure my first paid job. Mind you, it turned out to be an apprenticeship. But you know what? I wasn't complaining. Instead, I couldn't be more happier. £400 a month doesn't seem like much, but when you're living with your parents, with no other responsibilities, no bills and all, in a sense I was rich. But it wasn't long before the rainbow began to fade. My new boss, called Mr. Jones, is highly confident. He appeared strong, about 6'2" tall, weighing around 200 pounds. His voice was like a lion. He was quick to insult you if you did something wrong. His supervisor, his number 2 right-hand man, called Mr. Frank, was different but not far off. Mr. Jones, whilst loud and outgoing, Mr. Frank was a little more passive-aggressive. They both would not hesitate to hurl insults, but in different ways. Both people when they speak down at you hurt my inner man in the end. The first year after my apprenticeship was complete, that is I did business administration which went rather well to be honest. I then got hired officially by Mr. Jones to take care of all the admin work full time. My income went up, but what I didn't realize was so did the pressure to do a near perfect job. I'm a clumsy guy, I admit that. I make mistakes. Every day that I came into work, working 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday and 2 Saturdays a month, I'd bust my ass, go the extra mile, take on tons of work from other departments, be the best employee I could be. No, my friends, that kind of work didn't last very long. The daily insults, you're useless, you're a muppet. One time the boss was giving an induction to a new employee. He went around the office greeting everyone saying these are my employees with a smile. He then turned around, looking at me and said to the man, and here's half an employee. Oh, that really hurt on the inside. I am a forgetful guy, but I do try my best. And in order to make my performance better, I carry a notepad around to jot down key tasks my boss and supervisor assigned me to do. That way I don't have to go back to ask again what it is they want to do, because that is straight up embarrassing. Sometimes my boss and I would get into debates. He shared a particular religion he was quite open about, and he'd try to convert me, asking me various questions about my faith. Not that it was a problem. I did like those discussions. They challenges me, and in actuality I hoped one day to bring this man, who I was slowly despising, to Christ. At one point he asked me during a bathroom talk, "You're not gay, are you?" To which I replied no. He thought I might be gay since I was single and I guess you could say getting on in age. He then said, "Because if you are gay you will burn in hell." I was shocked, mortified. However, at the same time we Christians believe in hell too. But that's not the reason why people go to hell. In fact, I told him, if you believe in a false religion you will go to hell too. My friends whom I moved in with, after saving enough money to put a deposit down on an apartment, finally moving out of my parents' home, they told me, just get on with your job, don't talk about your faith in work. You're there to work and nothing else. On the other hand, I'm passionate, what can I say? It's a bit hard to hold back on your passions. Before I knew it, about 3 to 4 months had passed by as an official employee. No matter how hard I tried, I kept getting insulted by my boss and supervisor every day. It was wearing me down. I am a human being, not a robot. I have emotions. I have weaknesses. If I ran my own company I would never talk down to my employees no matter what. Just because you have a lot more money than me, doesn't give you the right to treat me or anyone like dirt. Eventually, due to the pressure, I handed in my notice. I saved around £2,000. It wasn't bad. I could make it work if I didn't give up looking for my next job. But my boss said, "Why don't you work here part-time?" So I did. I was working 8 a.m. till 2 p.m. Monday to Friday and some Saturdays. At first it was great, but £600 a month with now extra responsibilities, despite rent being divided amongst my 2 roommates, left me with nothing to save. I was still receiving daily insults, making mistake after mistake. I knew I had to leave, but the comfort of finishing work early and having the rest of the day to myself I quite enjoyed. But closer to the night, without question, I was dreading the next morning. During the lunch breaks, 15 minutes worth, me and my work friend would always talk about leaving this god-awful place. We were both depressed, except he worked full-time in another department close to mine. He got less insults than me because he was a more valued employee. As for myself, I heard my boss say, dispensable. I never heard that word before, so I looked it up on the internet. It means, not essential, unimportant. And man, even though I worked there for getting on 2 years, and I tell you the amount of staff members I saw leave during my time was stack high. The pain I felt inside, imagine that, you put all the effort into doing the best at your job, though you hate it, you are then told in a private meeting that you're not a valued employee. I get that you shouldn't take your job personally, but when you're dealing with people every day, whom you spend hours with, it's a bit hard not to. Another year went on, daily complaining to friends and family how much I hated this job. My £2,000 savings were almost down to zero since the £600 a month I was earning was not keeping me afloat. I couldn't enjoy any luxuries. I was going nowhere. With the money I saved I wanted to get a full driving license. I used what I had left, was doing quite well too whilst taking lessons in a manual car. Eventually my savings hit rock bottom. I couldn't afford any more driving lessons. That sucked. Now getting on to 25 years of age, single, no savings, no driving license, depressed to some degree. If it wasn't for my faith, I might have ended my life. I was wasting my time, my valuable time working there. Sometimes my boss would ask me to go buy some food for him, he'd give me the change. But when I went to the cafe to get the order, I was left short-handed. I had to use my own money to make up for the difference. He'd do this more than one occasion, but I was too afraid to confront him about it. My depression made me a coward once again. In church I was confident doing my ushering job, greeting my brothers and sisters in the faith, going on outreaches during the weekend, having no problems answering questions and engaging in polemics with the opposition and their challenges. In work I was nothing more than a doormat, who could be fired at any time. When will the nightmare end? I recently read a book about Christian manhood, how Jesus was not a nice person but good, righteous, brave, spoke his mind regardless of who he was talking to. I never thought of this way of thinking before. It was my job to be an ambassador, to mimic Christ. If he was allowed to behave in such a manner, then why can't I? Without falling into sin. Again I went through another change. I became unapologetically brave. From then on, I was no longer going to do other people's work, only my own. One time in work, and fellow staff member called Michael, who was head of the sales department, 6'1", 190 pounds, loud as a donkey but vicious as a pit bull, asked me to photocopy some documents for him, and I replied, "No, do it yourself. I've got my own work to do." Let's just say he didn't take no for an answer. That same hour he walked into my department and said to me, "Jake, you're getting very cheeky these days. Why don't you come to my house so I can get my dog on you?" Which clearly was a threat. Regardless, with my newfound confidence I responded, "Oh, so you have to get someone else to do the work?" Next thing I knew, he grabbed me from behind and tried to choke me. I didn't take it though. I stood up and knocked him into the wall behind me, and after he let go I said, "Never do that again," whilst catching my breath. Though I experienced conflict in the workplace, by confronting people who are bigger and have more of a presence than myself, being hurt and all, I was very happy. You'd have to admit that was a victory. At least I did. I even learned to say no to my supervisor and my boss. I was on a roll, life was good, my income still low, yet the sun began to shine once again in my direction. Let me tell you something. When I first started the job, I was meant to be a lead generator, on the phone answering calls, taking information and transferring the customer over to the sales department or the closers. I was terrible at it, but Mr. Jones didn't want to let me go just yet. Then he asked me if I wanted to do an apprenticeship. Having no other option, I responded yes, and that's how the ball began to so-called roll up until this day. My new confidence didn't last very long. The boss did become a little nicer to me, and because of that I let my guard down. When people spoke more nicely to me, the head of sales, the boss especially, I gave in once again, taking on more work than usual. One of my roommates, who was a few years younger than me, from the same church, he got a car, got his law degree in the university down the road, and now he was getting married to a beautiful woman. It was a slap to the face. I wanted a woman of my own too, but I wasn't ready for that, as much as I hate to admit it. I'm thankful for my roommate. He's a great guy. His success is something he deserved. Confident, smooth. Everybody liked him, and I'll tell you later how he really helped me out during a time of great need. 3 years went by in this first job of mine. Things were still the same. The insults came back. The arguments. One time when my boss was complaining about my performance or lack thereof, the supervisor took a jab at me too. Momentarily I fired back at my supervisor. "Why don't you just be quiet?" And with his Oxford British accent he responded, "You cheeky sod." I had enough. These two evil brothers purposely changed a legal document, a 2-week notice document employees had to sign to receive their final wages before leaving, as was given as part of the induction package during the first day on the job. One of my colleagues handed in his notice because he was going back to do his second year of university. He only worked during the summer holiday. I was eavesdropping at the time. This staff member, who I got to know, was told his last 2 weeks' pay is invalid because he had to wait for 3 weeks, not 2. The supervisor got rid of the 2-week notice and printed off a document that said the notice had to be 3 weeks. I knew I had to definitely quit. The levels of corruption was paramount. The so-called best and most valuable employees here had moral values worth less than dirty hyenas. I then focused really hard on leaving. Before I knew it, I updated my CV and applied everywhere. Hundreds of jobs, no matter what they were, I applied for. I did everything I could to get out. Being in a job that takes you nowhere such as mine, I no longer focused much on my appearance. I just wear a simply white shirt with a tie, black trousers and cheap office shoes. During the time of my interviews I'd dress up nicer than usual. For example, this time I'd wear a blazer. Not caring about the workplace anymore, my supervisor said to me, "Jack, you're dressed very nice. Do you have a job interview?" Not thinking about a careful response, I was being honest with him by saying, "Yes, that same hour my boss wanted to see me." "Jack, you are like Judas. You are betraying me for another job. You have until the end of your shift to decide not to go to your interview and continue working for me, or I'll have to let you go." I went back to my office thinking, this is a deciding moment. I need to make the right decision. I was coming to my wits' end. The fellow staff members I got to know over the years were leaving before me. I had not many people left to talk to. I had no motivation to try hard anymore. I hated my job and wondered why I allowed myself to put up with so much suffering. I was sick to death of having no money and not able to save anything after each month. To add to that, I would not be able to pay the month's rent that is to come. But even though I was in the deep end of struggling to live, I felt a strange sense of hope. I for some reason knew that if I was to say I'm leaving, that everything will be okay. With assurance, faith of the unseen, not knowing what the future will have in store for me, I took my chances. I walked back to the manager's office and said to Mr. Jones, "I'm going." Mr. Jones didn't like that he had to get the last laugh. "Jake, the work I got you to do was useless. I didn't need those spreadsheets. The only reason I kept you on was I liked you. You weren't needed here." What could I say at that point? I simply replied to him, "It was nice knowing you," with a smile on my face. I immediately packed my bag, told everyone in the office I'm leaving, then jolted on out of there. No money to pay the rent at the end of the month, no savings to my name, no job to go to. With the odds stacked against me, I did have some things in my arsenal. I had ambition. I wasn't going to let the light go out yet without a good fight. That same day I got fired. I spent the last of my money on a McDonald's meal. I wasn't worried about what would happen. I had trusted in God that everything will be all right. When I got home I explained to my two roommates what had happened and the position I was in. I asked to borrow money from them both and promised to pay them back. I had a nice sleep that night. The next morning, being unemployed with fire in my belly, I applied for literally hundreds of jobs, and answered every phone call that accepted my application. Unlike before when I was afraid of phone calls, I had tons of work experience. I knew the job I did like the back of my hand. I also gained tons of experience talking to various people over the years at my local church that I was serving in and engaging in missionary work across the UK. I didn't waste no time. I went to as many interviews as I could go to, and I did phone interviews too, until a few weeks later I landed a job that had better pay, full-time, and a much happier work environment. Finally I got savings in my bank account each month. The job role was more fulfilling, though seasonal, and my faith got stronger. Don't give up when times get tough. Trust in God, take a chance and get to work. Yours sincerely, Jake.